It was supposed to be just another ordinary morning, 2 weeks before the wedding, the day we were finally going to finalize the seating chart and confirm the floral arrangements. I woke up with a sense of purpose, ready to tackle our checklist, only to find her side of the bed empty. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe she went for an early jog or ran out for coffee. But when I reached for my phone to text her about meeting with the wedding planner, that's when everything started unraveling. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and there was an urgent message from the planner asking if we'd made any decisions on the last-minute changes they needed. My heart sank as I stared at the screen, trying not to spiral into panic. I called her again, nothing. Texted her, no reply. By noon, her absence wasn't just strange, it was suffocating. The silence in the apartment felt heavier with every passing minute. Desperate for answers, I reached out to her family. Her mom picked up, her voice trembling as she admitted she hadn't heard from me either. Then came the devastating news: her mother had collapsed under the stress of worrying about her missing daughter and was rushed to the hospital. My world tilted further into chaos. How could this happen? Wasn't she supposed to be here, planning our future? Instead, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind not just me but her own parents, who now feared the worst. As hours turned into days, paranoia consumed me. What if something terrible had happened? What if she was lying unconscious somewhere, hurt or worse? Every unanswered call felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. Friends refused to answer my texts. Some even blocked me outright, their silence screaming louder than words ever could. And then, late one sleepless night, scrolling through Instagram aimlessly, I stumbled upon the truth: a photo of her laughing carelessly at a bar halfway across the globe, surrounded by friends I barely recognized. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months, completely oblivious to the wreckage she'd left behind. My hands shook as I stared at the image, each pixel confirming what I couldn't bear to believe: she chose them over us, over me. By the time I stumbled upon the Instagram post, my mind was already a war zone. Every unanswered call, every ignored text had been like a grenade detonating in my chest. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw next. It wasn't just that she was in Spain, it was who she was with and what she was doing. There she was, front and center in a dimly lit club, her arm draped casually around someone who wasn't me, her ex-boyfriend from college. The same guy she'd sworn meant nothing to her after they broke up years ago. My breath hitched as I zoomed in on the photo, each pixel confirming my worst fears. They weren't just hanging out. No, this was something far more calculated, far more cruel. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months, laughing so hard her head tilted back, completely oblivious to the chaos she'd left behind. And then came the dagger: her Instagram story. She'd posted a boomerang of herself holding up a cocktail glass, captioned with "Who needs old-fashioned weddings when you can have this?" The hashtags were even worse: hashtag freedom over flowers, hashtag no regrets, hashtag living my best life. Each word felt like a slap across my face. How could she mock our life together, the vows we were supposed to exchange, the future we'd meticulously planned, as if it were some outdated relic? I scrolled through her feed frantically, piecing together clues I hadn't noticed before. That's when I found it: a screenshot of a group chat buried deep in her tagged photos. It was dated 3 weeks ago, a full month before she disappeared. The message read, "Pack your bags, Mia. Surprise trip to Barcelona locked in. Don't tell Jake, he'll freak." My blood ran cold. This wasn't spontaneous or impulsive. She'd known all along. Every smile she gave me during those final weeks leading up to the wedding, every promise she made about how excited she was. It was all a lie, a performance. I couldn't stop shaking as I stared at the screen. Her betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was premeditated. She'd sat across from me at dinner one night, gushing about how beautiful the floral arrangements would look, while secretly planning her escape. I remembered the way she'd brushed off my concerns when I asked why she seemed distant lately. "You're overthinking things," she'd said with a dismissive laugh. Overthinking? No, I wasn't overthinking. I was living in blissful ignorance while she plotted her getaway. And now, here I was, staring at proof of her duplicity, feeling like the biggest fool alive. The worst part, Her friends weren't innocent bystanders, they were accomplices. Scrolling further, I discovered comments under her posts from people I recognized. One friend wrote, "Told you this would be better than sitting through another cake tasting." Another chimed in, "Jake will get over it. You deserve fun." Their words weren't just careless, they were mocking. Mocking me, mocking everything we built together. It was as if they viewed our relationship as a joke, something easily discarded for a week of partying in Spain. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone against the wall, but instead, I sat there frozen, consumed by a mix of rage and despair. The call came late at night, just as I was about to give up on her ever contacting me again. My phone buzzed violently against the wooden table, startling me out of a restless daze. Her name flashed across the screen, Mia. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over me. Maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe this would be the apology I desperately needed to hear. But the second I answered, her voice slurred and dripping with mockery, shattered any hope I had left. "Hey, Jakey," she drawled, her tone laced with condescension. "Still mad at me? You're such an old-fashioned boyfriend, you know that." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Old-fashioned. After everything she'd done, disappearing without explanation, laughing it up in Spain while I was drowning in anxiety, she dared to label me as outdated. I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white, forcing myself to stay calm. "Where are you, Mia?" I demanded, trying not to let my anger boil over immediately. She giggled a hollow, drunken laugh that made my skin crawl. "Oh, somewhere fun. Not stuck in some boring apartment obsessing over seating charts and flower arrangements." Her words were sharp, cutting deeper than any blade could. It wasn't just the insult, it was the casual cruelty behind them. This wasn't the woman I fell in love with. This was someone else entirely, a stranger who seemed intent on tearing apart every last shred of dignity I had left. But the worst was yet to come. As if sensing my silence, she continued, emboldened by alcohol and whatever twisted sense of righteousness her friends had fed her. "You know what we've been saying here, that maybe tying yourself down so young is stupid. Like, why rush into marriage when there's still so much life to live?" My heart pounded in my chest as her voice grew louder, more venomous. "We talked about it, Jake. About how maybe putting off the wedding or even canceling it altogether wouldn't be the worst thing. Freedom first, right?" Each word felt like a knife twisting further into my soul. They'd discussed this, discussed us, behind my back. While sipping cocktails under the Spanish sun, they'd plotted ways to delay or outright destroy the future I thought we both wanted. And then came the final blow, delivered with chilling clarity despite her intoxicated state. "I choose freedom over commitment. Jake, I need to figure out who I am before I can be tied down to anyone." The line went dead after that, leaving me staring at the phone in stunned disbelief. Her choice wasn't ambiguous anymore, it was glaringly obvious. She didn't want me. She didn't want us. And suddenly, the weight of her betrayal crashed down on me like a tidal wave. Every sleepless night, every unanswered text, every ounce of trust I'd placed in her, it all meant nothing. That's when I knew there was no going back from this. No amount of pleading or forgiveness could mend what she had broken. So, sitting alone in the dim glow of my phone screen, I typed out the message I never imagined I'd send: "The wedding is off." My hands trembled as I pressed send, but with each tap of the keyboard, a strange sense of liberation began to take root. I wasn't just ending the wedding, I was reclaiming my life. From that moment on, I vowed never to settle for anything less than the respect and love I deserved. The fallout from canceling the wedding hit me like a tidal wave, crashing over every aspect of my life until I felt like I was drowning. At first, it wasn't just Mia's absence that weighed on me, it was the judgment, the relentless criticism from both sides of our families. Her parents were the first to lash out. "How could you do this?" Her father demanded during one particularly heated phone call. His voice was sharp, cutting through the fragile shell of resolve I'd built around myself. "You're ruining her future. She's given 6 years of her life to you, and now you throw it all away because she went on one trip. You're selfish, selfish." The word echoed in my mind long after he hung up, leaving me reeling. But it wasn't just him. Her mother joined in too, sobbing hysterically between accusations. Do you have any idea what people will say about her? About us? You've destroyed everything. And then came my own family, who should have been my refuge but instead became another source of torment. My mom called late one night, her tone clipped and accusatory. Why can't you just forgive her? People make mistakes, Jake, she said, as if forgiving betrayal was as simple as flipping the switch. When I tried to explain how deeply Mia had hurt me, how she ghosted me, mocked our relationship, and dismissed my feelings entirely, my mom interrupted with a sigh. You're being dramatic. Just let it go. Let it go. How could I let go of something that felt like it had shattered the very foundation of my trust? But the worst blow came at work. My boss, a close friend of Mia's uncle, pulled me into his office 2 days after the cancellation announcement. He didn't even bother to mask his disdain. Listen, Jake, he began, leaning back in his chair with an air of superiority. I don't know what happened between you two, but this is affecting your performance. Clients are talking. They're saying you're unstable, unreliable. Is this really worth throwing away your career over? Unstable, unreliable. I stared at him, stunned. Was this really happening? Before I could respond, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. If you don't fix this mess and soon, I might have to reconsider your position here. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. A week later, I walked into the office to find my desk cleared out, my belongings stuffed into a cardboard box. I was fired, just like that. As if losing my job wasn't enough, my social circle crumbled right along with it. Friends we'd shared dinners with, laughed with, celebrated holidays with, they all turned their backs on me. Some outright blocked me on social media, while others sent passive-aggressive texts accusing me of being too harsh or heartless. One mutual friend even confronted me at a bar, his face flushed with anger. You had 6 years together, man, 6 years. And you throw it all away because she wanted to live a little. What's wrong with you? Live a little. Did they not understand the depth of her betrayal, or did they simply refuse to see it? Isolated, unemployed, and drowning in self-doubt, I began questioning whether I'd made the right choice. Had I been too unforgiving, too quick to pull the plug on a relationship that everyone else seemed desperate to salvage? But deep down, I knew the truth. Forgiveness without accountability only perpetuates pain. Still, the loneliness was suffocating. Every unanswered text, every ignored call, every silent dinner alone, it all compounded into a weight so heavy I could barely breathe. The days following Mia's departure felt like an endless descent into darkness, each moment heavier than the last. I tried to hold myself together, but the weight of everything, the betrayal, the judgment from others, the sheer emptiness of my apartment crushed me under its suffocating grip. It started with sleepless nights. At first, it was just tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling as memories replayed on a loop in my mind. But soon, those restless hours turned into full-blown insomnia. My body begged for rest, but my brain refused to shut off, consumed by thoughts of what I could have done differently. Was I too harsh, too unforgiving? The questions haunted me relentlessly, gnawing at my sanity until I couldn't tell where reality ended and despair began. By week 3, the cracks in my mental state became impossible to ignore. Simple tasks, getting out of bed, brushing my teeth, answering emails, felt insurmountable. I'd sit on the edge of the mattress for hours, paralyzed by exhaustion and self-loathing. One night, after yet another wave of panic attacks left me gasping for air, I found myself standing on the balcony of our my apartment, gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles turned white. The city below buzzed with life, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. For a fleeting second, I thought about letting go. Just stepping forward and ending it all. What was the point anymore? Everything I had worked for, every dream I'd built with Mia, had crumbled into dust. And now here I was, utterly alone, drowning in a sea of shame and regret. But something stopped me, a faint voice deep within that whispered, "Not yet." So instead of jumping, I sank further into despair. By month 2, the financial strain added another layer of misery. Between losing my job and paying off the wedding vendor's cancellation fees, I barely had enough money to cover rent. When the eviction notice arrived taped to my door, I didn't even argue. What was the use? I packed up the few belongings I hadn't already boxed away and moved into a dingy studio apartment on the outskirts of town. It was smaller than a shoebox, with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet that dripped incessantly through the night. Each drop echoed like a ticking clock, counting down the seconds until I completely unraveled. And then came the anxiety. It wasn't just occasional nerves. It was a constant, suffocating presence that followed me everywhere. Grocery stores became battlegrounds. I'd stand frozen in the cereal aisle, overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices, unable to decide or move forward. Crowds made my chest tighten, my heart racing as if it might explode. Even phone calls triggered waves of dread. I avoided mirrors because I couldn't bear to look at the hollow shell of the person I used to be. Therapy helped, but progress was slow. Every session felt like chipping away at a mountain with a spoon while the avalanche kept coming. Just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, the universe decided to twist the knife even deeper. It started with an anonymous email that landed in my inbox late one night, a subject line reading, "You deserve to know the truth." My heart raced as I clicked it open, half expecting some cruel prank or another round of judgment from Mia's friends. But what I found instead sent chills down my spine. Attached was a series of documents, bank statements, loan agreements, and screenshots of conversations that painted a picture so horrifying it made me question everything I thought I knew about her. Mia wasn't just careless, she was drowning in debt. Thousands of dollars worth of credit card bills, personal loans, and overdue payments were piling up behind the facade of our perfect life together. The wedding, it wasn't just about love or commitment for her, it was a financial lifeline. According to the emails, she had meticulously planned to use the wedding gifts and cash envelopes from guests to pay off her mounting debts. One spreadsheet even detailed how much each guest was expected to contribute based on their relationship to us. Her parents, who I assumed were footing most of the wedding costs, were barely involved financially. Instead, they were pressuring her to marry me because they believed I could stabilize her chaotic life. But the betrayal didn't stop there. As I scrolled through the attachments, I stumbled upon chat logs between Mia and her so-called best friends, the same ones who had ghosted me during those frantic days when she disappeared. Their messages revealed something far more sinister. They weren't just encouraging her reckless behavior, they were actively using her. Planning trips like the one to Spain wasn't about bonding, it was about living vicariously through her while avoiding expenses themselves. One message stood out, "Just tell Jake you need space before the wedding. He'll understand. Meanwhile, we can party without spending a dime." Another friend joked, "Once you're married, maybe he'll foot the bill for all this fun." Reading those words felt like being punched in the gut. These people weren't her friends, they were parasites feeding off her desperation. And then came the final blow, proof that Mia's betrayal wasn't isolated to this incident. Buried among the files were text exchanges showing she'd lied to me countless times before about work trips, family emergencies, even small details like where she spent her weekends. Each lie was carefully crafted, covered up with excuses or distractions until I stopped questioning them altogether. She'd manipulated me into trusting her completely, only to shatter that trust in the cruelest way possible. Sitting there in the dim glow of my laptop screen, I felt numb. How could someone I loved so deeply be capable of such calculated deceit? Every moment we shared now seemed tainted, every memory overshadowed by the realization that she hadn't chosen me, not truly. This wasn't just about a trip to Spain or a canceled wedding anymore. It was about survival for both of us. And as painful as it was to face these truths, I realized I'd dodged a bullet. Marrying Mia wouldn't have saved either of us, it would have destroyed us both. Just when I thought the chaos had reached its peak, a new storm hit, one that felt like it came straight out of a legal drama. Mia's family, still reeling from the fallout of the canceled wedding, decided to take things a step further. They filed a lawsuit against me for emotional distress and financial damages. Apparently, according to them, calling off the wedding wasn't just an act of self-preservation, it was a betrayal so severe it warranted legal action. The claim, they demanded reimbursement for every penny they'd spent on what they called our shared future. It was absurd. I sat in my lawyer's office, staring at the stack of papers detailing their demands, my hands trembling as I processed the sheer audacity of it all. How could they twist something so personal into a courtroom battle? The lawsuit dragged on for months, each hearing feeling like another nail being hammered into my coffin. Every deposition, every email exchange dissected under scrutiny, only deepened the wound. Her father took the stand during one particularly grueling session, his voice laced with venom as he accused me of ruining not just Mia's life, but their entire family's reputation. "You humiliated us," he spat, his words cutting deeper than any blade. And yet, through it all, I refused to back down. This wasn't about money or pride anymore, it was about standing firm in the truth. I hadn't destroyed anyone's life, I had saved my own. But the emotional toll of the trial pushed me closer to the edge than ever before. Nights became unbearable again, sleep elusive, and the familiar fog of depression crept back in. That's when I realized I couldn't do this alone. Therapy became my lifeline, a weekly ritual where I unpacked the layers of trauma, guilt, and anger that had been festering inside me. My therapist challenged me to confront the darkest corners of my mind, asking questions that forced me to reevaluate everything. What are you holding on to? Why are you afraid to let go? At first, I resisted. Opening up felt like tearing open old scars, but slowly, painfully, I began to heal. Each session was like chipping away at a mountain of rubble, and covering fragments of the person I used to be before Mia's betrayal shattered my world. Rebuilding my life outside the courtroom proved equally daunting. Financially, I was drowning. Between legal fees and paid bills and the loss of my previous job, I found myself working part-time gigs just to keep a roof over my head. There were days when I skipped meals because groceries felt like an unnecessary expense. Friends who once promised support disappeared when they realized helping meant more than just offering sympathetic words. Loneliness became my constant companion, but I refused to let it define me. Instead, I poured every ounce of energy into creating a new normal. I picked up odd jobs delivering packages, tutoring students online, and even started freelancing in graphic design, a skill I'd neglected since college. Each small victory, no matter how insignificant, reminded me that I was capable of surviving without her. And then there were the moments of clarity, the quiet mornings when I'd sit by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the city wake up around me. Those moments taught me resilience. Life wasn't fair, and people weren't always kind, but I could choose how to respond. By the time the lawsuit finally ended with the judge dismissing most of their claims, I felt like a different person, stronger, wiser, determined to never settle for anything less than the love and respect I deserved. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, a mutual friend's birthday party at a rooftop bar downtown. I hadn't planned on going. The idea of small talk and forced smiles made my skin crawl. But Sarah, my girlfriend now for 6 months, convinced me it would be good for me. "You can't keep avoiding people from your past," she said gently, her hand resting on mine. She didn't know the full story, but she knew enough that Mia had left me weeks before our wedding, and that I'd spent the better part of a year rebuilding myself from the wreckage. Reluctantly, I agreed. The moment I walked into the venue, though, I felt the air shift. The music seemed louder, the chatter more chaotic, as if the universe itself was warning me something was about to go wrong. And then I saw her, Mia. She stood across the room, laughing with someone new, his arm draped casually around her waist. My chest tightened instantly, memories flooding back like a tidal wave. For a split second, I considered turning around and leaving. But before I could move, she looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. Time froze. Her smile faltered, replaced by an expression I couldn't quite read: guilt, regret, or maybe just shock. She approached me later, when Sarah had gone to the restroom and I was standing alone near the edge of the balcony. "Jake," she said softly, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" My heart pounded in my chest, torn between anger and longing. Part of me wanted to walk away to protect myself from whatever emotional storm this conversation might unleash. But another part, the stubborn part, nodded silently. We stepped outside onto the dimly lit terrace, the city lights twinkling below us like distant stars. Before I could say anything, she started speaking rapidly, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I've thought about you every day since everything happened. I know I messed up, I know I hurt you, but I never stopped loving you. Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. Please, Jake, give me another chance. I'll do anything. Her plea hit me like a freight train, stirring emotions I thought I'd buried long ago. For a moment, I hesitated. Could I forgive her? Should I? But then I remembered the sleepless nights, the betrayal, the way she'd laughed in Spain while I was drowning in anxiety. This wasn't the same person I'd fallen in love with. That version of her was gone, replaced by someone who couldn't or wouldn't respect what we'd built together. No, I said firmly, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm sorry, Nia, but I can't. Her face crumpled, and she reached out instinctively, grabbing my arm. But I need you, she whispered, her desperation raw and unfiltered. I was wrong, I see that now. Please don't do this. For the first time in over a year, I felt no hesitation. You chose this, I told her, gently pulling my arm free. You chose him, that trip, everything, and I chose to let you go. It's too late to change that. As painful as it was to say those words, they carried a weight of finality that felt liberating. Watching her cry there under the neon glow of the city lights, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was free. When Sarah returned, finding me leaning against the railing with a faint smile on my face, she raised an eyebrow. Everything okay? She asked cautiously. I nodded, exhaling deeply. Yeah, I replied. For the first time in a long time, I think it really is.